Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Plus3 Futures and Commodities Show. My name is Ben Maldonado. As always, I'm here with my partner, Barrie Hederachi. How you doing, Barrie?
Doing really well.
That's good to hear. We broke out of the sideways in
Finally
ES,
got a
so
little bit of move.
we got some action. It's Friday, May 19th, after the market closes when we're recording. And on today's show, we're going to cover the big five with Barrie, which is ES, bonds, gold, crude oil, copper, the dollar and the euro. And commodity wise, this week, I'm going to touch on cotton, coffee, nat gas, and I'll add a little extra spice to the crude oil that Barrie's going to cover. So Barrie, we're almost through May. Hard to believe. The market finally broke out of the sideways, and it's had some sort of reverberations here all across markets. What were you seeing this week that really surprised you?
Well, what surprised me was that we didn't get a false break to the downside.
Right, right.
Well, that was a surprise. I was kind of looking for that, but it's okay because we nailed the levels and it moved up perfectly, so it was okay.
Yeah, now we got to decide what comes next here. What's the evidence tell us comes next? We'll
We got a lot
start with
to talk about. We got a lot to
yeah,
talk about.
yeah. Let's talk about Bitcoin here first.
Mhm.
Bitcoin, as broke out with this move using levels perfectly. I mean, level to level really nicely, even stopping in the middle for us a few times. And
Mhm.
now we see that the bears won the battle here at this level. And that level is on Bitcoin, along with everything else. By the way, these levels are up on a spreadsheet that we'll post the link to when we tweet out the final recording tomorrow.
Mhm.
It's in this 28,800 level. There was quite a battle here. 6-7 week battle at this level. We've rolled over, and now we're this is a definition of sort of how you get stuck under, right? Because it came down, rallied back up, couldn't even make it to it, and now we're sort of going sideways here, well below that level. What it looks like to me, what it's doing is we're going to continue this roll or sideways, test this half square, and probably this trend line from the lows.
Mhm.
So I don't think it's in a super bullish position right now. To be bullish, we're going to have to clear, this 28.8 level again and sit on top of it. Otherwise, there could be a drift or weakness down into this half square. Anything else to add on Bitcoin? I know it's not super exciting again. It's kind of quieted down.
Well, it could get exciting if we take out like today's low.
Mm-hmm.
Geometry wise, I have that sort of pegged. And I think if we take it out, even just by a little bit, it's possible that we get down into 23.5 or so.
Right.
I don't know
And
where you have that.
the half square is at 24.3. So right there is the half square.
23.5 is where?
It's going to be right about here,
Oh,
right
okay.
there.
All right. So that's what I have if we take out today's low. Otherwise, I have massive resistance around 28.4.
Right there.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with it. We
Mhm.
know the levels. You watch the levels. When it hits a level, we know what to do. So
But the daily is definitely unbalances to the downside right now, unless we don't take out this low, today's low.
right.
Not even
Yeah.
the low prior to that. I'm talking about today's low.
No, I see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's heavy. I would describe it as trading heavy.
Yep.
All right, let me throw it over to you and let's jump in because as we said, there's a lot to cover in these markets. Wow, look, it's pinned right up there.
Yeah.
Pinned and in the box.
Another Friday,
Yep.
look for the pins. Well, a couple of things to mark out, sort of summary, because we've talked about this stuff for a while, and every week it's hard to cover everything all over again. So this might be a good time to review. Coming around Monday, Tuesday, we're coming up on 360 bars from the high, and that will be 360 high to high, and that's significant.
That's big. That's big.
And especially because we're it's going to be 360 by 72 right there. So that neighborhood, interestingly, that could set up a false break up in here. So we have to really be careful with this, especially because we couldn't hold above 42.10, 42.7. We talked about that, on Twitter, if that we really need to hold above that to break through this. And we couldn't do that. And it's a looking little false breaky, but we'll see how that works out. So we have that 360 coming up, and we have 225 degrees coming up next week from the low. So that's something. And there are a few other counts setting up. So all of it's telling us, next week, possibly going into end of May, we could be setting up for a high in here. Even though I've been very bullish this entire time, right? While
I'm the same.
sideways.
The same. Yep.
And we will, the bullish bearishness is really not my thing to call out. It's really based on the levels, and it works. So we'll just leave it alone, and we'll continue to work with that. What you see here is 4150, and we kept talking about how it's really the 4150 that we need to get above, and if we do that, we can expect the market to be fairly strong.
Mm-hmm.
And well, we got that. And if you guys have been following us for a while, you see the box that we drew out when this started out, or maybe even March. I can't remember, but anyway, it just so happens today high was right at the top of that box, which just happens to be 72 down, is right around 42.20, 42.30, right in there.
And Barry, remember, for weeks you've been saying 42.30 needs to be cleared.
Right.
To be really bullish, I'm looking at my notes, 42.30, and the high today was 42.27 1/4.
Man, you're taking notes on these things.
We're right there. We're right there.
Yeah. We're right there, and we're walking into next week with the 360 coming in, and that's the thing here. It's not not everything else, but here's the other side. Flip side of that is, if we now here comes the 42.30 in play. If we can get on top of that 42.30 through this cycle, we got a long way to go, man.
That's bullish. Yes, super
that's
bullish.
really bullish, right?
Yep.
And this, where we are right now, right in here, is really about like 50% of the range. So that's kind of where we are. And breaking up on to the top of that at a key cycle level would mean a lot. So we really have to watch that. And the entire project over here is on a bullish tilt, long as, on the long term, in the bigger picture, long as we're above these channel here, or you can say the lower trend lines. So, it's not in any trouble at this point. I'm just saying we do have that square coming up. I mean, how often are you going to get 360? It's like once a year, right?
Yeah. And the other thing, Barry, you always say this, and it's something I remember, which is it's something to notice. You have to note it. You have to keep it in your mind, and you have to just leave it there and set it there. And then the price action is going to tell you whether it's significant or not.
Right. I think it sort of files under like situational awareness. We have to notice these things, because if something happens, then we can kind of tag it to, oh yeah, of course we had that setting up. So
right, we had the 360, so it turned, right?
But
conceivably it could. I mean, one of the things, it could just chop around here or come to the bottom of your channel and go sideways and work through the cycle like that.
Well, listen, two things. One thing is, you always say, market will try to screw the most number of people.
Absolutely.
And it couldn't screw any more if we false break up into here and then reverse. Okay.
Correct.
So I have to tell you that. And what evidence do we have to even mention that? Well, we have a big high to high potentially setting up in here. And we have a low to high. We have 225 degrees, not bars. So that's setting up. So there's a number of things in play here. We can't ignore it. It just happens to be right there. So not like we can change the count.
Also, Barry, from the low in October, we're 90 up.
90 degrees up, right?
Yeah, 90 degrees up in price. So
and that's important to look at. So let's take a look at that. course, the 360 stays the same, right? Because
Yep.
it's just the same number of bars. So if we go from here, there's 90 up.
Boom, 90 up.
Right. So a couple of things to notice for you guys. The reason this level is really critical is because it's not just 90 up, but it's also 72 down. Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So that's kind of a big deal. And
They got you coming and going.
And what do you get when you add 90 and 72? Right? Look at this number right here.
Wow.
Right? And
just a coincidence though, Barrie, isn't it? It's all just a coincidence.
It's beautiful. The geometry.
It doesn't mean anything.
But here's the thing. Now, I just switched, if you guys are watching, I just switched to the 30-minute chart that I've been posting. I post it every day just with a quick.
Yeah, that's a good chart. It's a really good chart. It's like, it's like the cousin to my 60-minute ping pong. They act very similarly.
They're related. So, so here's the square 52, and it helped us get through this whole thing without getting all chopped up.
Right.
And I was talking to the guys yesterday about how we broke out exactly at 4150, the number that we were talking about. You know, you kind of crawled up into here, 3 bars, and then boom, right above that. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up.
Right.
Then we got up to 108, and we talked about, look, the market has to hold above it. What happened? Market went up to the 50%, came back, held above it.
Yep.
And blasted right into the third square of 54, which just happened to be 162, right?
Right.
And which is funny, on the daily, 90 plus 72, just right
162.
It's a different relationship, but isn't that funny how harmonics just play, right?
Yeah.
I think that,
and that's a beautiful example. You know, put your highlighter on that pullback, because that's a beautiful example of how you clear a level, right?
This one right here. Yeah.
We always talk about that. Like when it's chopping around back and forth like it did, that's not clearing. Going up and pulling back, holding, and then going. That's the clear.
All right. And yesterday I posted when the market got up to here, and I said, hey, heads up, you know, we're heading up into this, heading up into this square. And isn't that funny? It just couldn't take it out, right? Tried this morning, you know, really hard.
Yep.
Did a false break.
And here we are at the half square.
False break, and bam, back down to here. So that doesn't mean anything in terms of, you know, oh, it's a bear market now or anything like that, because we did take out these levels very precisely. And, you know, long as we're above the 108, you know, 2 squares up around 4170, 72, you know, market's in decent shape for now. Now, if it wasn't for any of those other squares, but it just so happens, you know, we have this 360 count coming in. And we're 90 up, 72 down. So, you know, there's a couple of things to notice here. I think it can't be ignored. And since, you know, our job to call this stuff out, you know, we have to call it out, and you can put it in your notes, right?
Absolutely. And it's how you be prepared for what may happen, right? We don't know what's going to happen next. We just know that the certain levels and the time counts tell you have to be aware, and you have to look, and you have to notice.
Right.
Because things could change.
So that's sort of the summary for the daily. Let's take a look.
That's excellent summary, man. That's really good work.
Thanks. So we're looking at the weekly now, 72, square 72. And, you know, we've been pushing up against this, not really dropping. And over the months, I've been saying every time you look at the weekly, maybe not every time, but often enough, I say, listen, you know, we're not selling off this line with any strength, you know, and with a lot of weakness, let's say. And because of that, you know, that's a bullish sign. And you know, we're starting to make higher lows and higher lows. So typically this is sort of a breakout signature. And the fact that we cleared the 216 is, you know, pretty good. You know, we were able to do it. But I think before we get all the party goods out, I think we have to really keep the 360 bars in mind, just to see if we can clear it or not. Because, you know, you see what happened back here, back in August. You know, we broke out and we immediately reversed, false break up here, right? Over the previous week, and just sold off, had a really hard sell off. And, you know, it could happen again. And how do we know if it's, how do we measure that? Well, the 216 is right around 41.30. So we want to make sure that price can, on a weekly basis, it can hold above that. So if next week survives above 41.30 on net, let's say, then I would say the balance is shifting for price to be comfortable above the square, versus below. But it's tricky because, look, we've just been slicing back and forth across it for 6-7 weeks. So, we have to be a little bit patient. And it'll pay off because whatever comes out of this line is going to be trade worthy.
Big move.
Yeah, in the bigger time frame. So it's not like a 5-minute chart. So it's okay.
And listen, as many markets do, on my weekly, the half square was around 4,200, 4,202, and look at where we closed.
Exactly.
So we're essentially on the, straddling the half square on a weekly close, which means it's not giving us a definitive answer yet.
Well, what we have is a potential trap.
Yes.
And if we can get beyond that, I think the market's going to be in really good shape. And remember, no matter what happens, there's a channel going up here, and it's a fairly solid channel. We had a nice test here that worked out, and because it was really drawn with the highs, not the lows, so so it looks pretty good. So the only sort of the thing to be cautious next week would be really to watch the price level at the 72 and the 360, see if we square it out or not. And, let's see how it plays out. If we see a lot of weakness, it's probably that's probably what's in action. What's traction. All right, let's move on to bonds.
Action there too.
Really good action there. And
stalemate broke.
We were calling for the bonds to go lower, and it did. And that's all I had to say about it.
Yeah. And the box perfectly defined the congestion, and we've broken out of the box.
Exactly. You can see this little inside bar right there, right before the breakdown. So it worked out nicely. And the equilibrium lines really held that pushing. You can see the pushing, right? Didn't quite get in there. So everything worked out, which means there's no, the Gartley kind of faltered, and there are bigger things in play here. So if this is going lower, I would, the basic trend really is to the downside. We're expecting at least for it to go down and test the February lows right around 122.5 or so. All right.
Yeah. I mean, weekly and monthly support, I got around like 125, 126 area. So it can blast through that this coming week if it wants.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing since we took this out and it doesn't look like a false break, so we're probably going to continue to kind of
push,
grind down this way. And we have a high right there where this thing came and retested. So it's looks like, we'll see. I'm looking at the weekly. How do you like that?
Beautiful ellipse.
Yep. And beautiful triangle.
Yeah, very nice.
So we had that drawn out, and you can see really couldn't get above. And now we're coming in to test the line,
which is around 125, 126.
Line. Yeah, there's your 125, 126.
Yep.
So if we get through that, I mean, clearly quarter square here is the next level. Is around 122, 122.5. Is the next test. And if that goes, we're clearly getting down to 144.
That's what you've been saying, and the story's playing out that way
so far. But one thing at a time. So let's wait for this low to be tested and taken out.
Sure.
And if that works out,
that opens up to 144 for sure.
Right. All right. So that's it for bonds. Let's review crude a little bit. I think it's resting after all that action.
Yeah.
But the thing to remember here is, day to day, we want to just not forget this. We did have a important low come in at this point. Right?
That was a spike low with a false break.
Low, and we were looking for a higher low on a pullback, which we have. And this could be a complex 2 that's forming here.
Yeah, so the 3 could be coming.
Which could give us a 3 that's, a halfway decent impulse. One scenario, we'll see. We're not really fancy with Elliott waves, but the basics we know pay off enough, right? Well enough. So let's see. And if we hold these lows next week, It's definitely more positive. That would be around 69. We want to hold that. It's possible we get down here, 67 area, but the key thing is we hold this low for now, and we want to see the quality of this leg that's forming up here. If it's a complex two, like what I'm thinking, then I think it's going to start to slowly move higher. So let's see how
I agree with you 100%. There's a chance you can catch a fast move in crude this coming week. And when you throw it over to me, I'm going to show you something on the weekly crude that is really interesting, that supports exactly what you're saying.
Do you have one of your circles kicking in?
Yep. One of the circles. Yep.
All right, great. So looking at the weekly crude, well, can you see that okay? Are these colors okay?
Yeah, it all looks fine.
I should probably standardize all the charts and bars, but keeps it different, keeps it fresh. So anyway, last week we had an inside week. This week we had a lower low, but we had a higher close. So as far as I'm concerned, this is kind of consolidating still. And we're sort of hanging under here. So weekly basis, really not much to do. Now you could call this, hey, are we in some kind of a downtrend? It's possible. I mean, until we get above this 50% level here, the 73.50 or so, it's not exactly strong.
Right.
But we have to consider the corner that came in down here. So as far as that's concerned, if you take it from that pivot, then we're holding up, right?
Yep.
So it's the importance of looking, your reference is really important. What are you going to reference off of? Okay, here we are. Is our reference the last low? Is it the last high? Is it the all-time high? You know what I mean? So looking at, or is it the all-time low over here?
Right.
So depending on your reference point, the opinion could change. And since we're looking at the shorter term, trading the shorter term, this would work. We're going off this low, which is the nearest swing point. So if we can basically hold this, like I said, 67 area, I think crude's in pretty good shape.
Barry, that's a really important point you brought up. The reference of what reference high or low are you going to use at the end of the show? We should talk about that, because that's part of the reason we do all the work we do on trying to find these corners and squares and a certain number of degrees, 90s or 180s or 360s, because it gives you a good anchor to then reference.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, we can do that. I'll touch on that. So moving on to gold, not giving it up.
Yeah, look at that close right on your 90.
Very enthusiastic close, right?
And that's another good ellipse. You got good ellipses working these days.
Yeah, we set them up last week.
Yeah, nice.
Because we didn't have much to talk about, but
I'm sideways, right?
Yeah, let's see how it works out. But based on the ellipse and the 90, with everything's kind of lining up there, it did lose the footing. It's under the 90 now. So it's a little weak. Of course, the dollar was a little bit strong this week. So, gold sold off. And it's possible that, this is a correction into this down leg. And it's the inside bar. So it's a little bearish. So we'll see how it works out next week. 1940 is minor support, and 1887 is major support. And let's take a look at the weekly. Well, you can see, we have this really steep channel, so it's in good shape long as we can hold above it. So we have a couple of 2-3 weeks we can go sideways without a problem. Basis the weekly chart, this 1919 level is important. That's the top of this box I had drew out. I can't remember why I drew it, but anyway. The main thing is we're above it now. And as long as we're above the box, we're in pretty good shape. And we talked about last week, we talked about the 50% of the square and why it's important. And we were talking about how, we just bounced 3 times and a potential false break here over this high. And it's possible this might be done for now. But if you look at the bigger picture, long as we're above this 1919, 1881 sort of level, it's in a place to just spike, run up anytime on short notice. Very, very bullish position. But for now, it looks like, we had an inside bar. Remember I said next week, if we take out the prior week's low, it's going to probably sell off.
Mm-hmm.
We got that. So let's see how it works out.
I mean, the summary there is the correction in gold is underway. We just got to see how deep and how long it's going to be.
Exactly. That's it. It's not complicated.
Mm-mm.
Looking at copper, not much to add. We talked about it consolidating or even testing this level about 3.5, 355.
Mm-hmm.
And long as we're below the 50% of the square, around 380, it's soft. You can see, trend is not that strong, but it is in a weak position now.
Mm-hmm.
Below that 380. 380, 350 is sort of the range here for now, because it really couldn't hold above that. And I think it's a little soft for now.
Yeah, put an ABC on that and you'll see we also complete. Here? Yeah. You got a nice little ABC, but it does look like it could push a little lower.
Well, I guess
We'll
we
see.
did.
We just have to see if it holds, right?
Yeah, if that holds, for sure.
It's not screaming out of there, which is not too positive, but we'll see what happens.
That's a pretty good ABCD though.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other one is right there. So yeah, we could be done. Or like I said, if we take these out, then definitely 350 is the next level around there.
Mm-hmm. So we'll watch it.
I'll leave it on there. It'll be good to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And the weekly copper, well, it slipped a little more.
Broke out of your triangle.
Yeah, broke out of the triangle a couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, we had this little box drawn in saying, if we take out the low of that box, it's gonna, it's in a weak position. So we've had 4 weeks of downside after the box broke out. We had, triangle set up, broke out of that. So I think last week we talked about, if the fork is holding, the lower fork is holding, that would be, it's still positive. I mean, long as we're above 90, it's on a positive balance. So we can do all kinds of shenanigans here, but we're above that. So I would say up until we get some kind of a timing set up off that low, we'll have to just sort of go with it. We had 45 high to high. So, and that cooled it off a little bit. So we might have to go for 990 high to low, right?
Sure.
That would give us a 90 high to low and a 45 high to low. And that would be the low to buy if it lines up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, listen, if we can chop around that 90 down there, that would be, and burn off the time, it might not be bad at all.
But this time is important. So we'll see how that plays out, especially because the 45 worked out, right? So,
yep.
All right. We have the dollar. Well, what to recap? If you guys have been watching it every week, we've been talking about the 50% line for weeks and weeks. And the 101 is a key level. And we were looking, if it can hold that and start moving above this congestion, we were looking for it to go higher. And I think that's what's happening. And for now, if we use our method, we have an inside bar. So it's okay. I think it can move higher. We might get a 1 or 2 bar counter trend. We'll see how that works out. But on balance, it's bullish. Keeping it simple.
Quietly bullish.
Quietly bullish. Well, here's a weekly chart and the same song. I've been talking about this 90 level, saying there's a 101, 100, 101, 150 is the level to hold, and anything above that is bullish. And that panned out. So, and I think the basic story is still the same. Long as we're above that, it's bullish. We'll see how this counter trend goes. If we can pull up a couple of weeks, a couple of bars in there, we pull back into this a higher low or something, that would really set up a nice third leg. So that's one thing. And this was a low. This was like a false break low. And that could have been a 5. We had a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yep.
Possible we finished it. So it's also possible we do like a little ABCD consolidation before we hightail it out of there. We'll keep all those things in mind. As long as you know those levels, I think it's easy to trade that in that. At least the direction.
Right.
And the reverse For the euro, we've been talking about the 144 by 144 square, and we were looking for it to drop a little, but there was a lot of pressure in there, had a little bit of overrun, but it really didn't take out the next 8, which is really kind of what we look for. If something's going to burn through. And we started making lower highs and slipped through the 144, and then we called out it to be weaker, and we got the weakness. And I think it's still weak. That's how it's going to be.
Yeah, it's got to get back above that 144.
Yeah, I think now, if you look at the timing, as long as we're below like 109, 110, it's weak, and we'll see how that plays out. Basically, think of it as opposite of the dollar, right? And looking at the euro,
the weekly,
the little bullish party might be over. This 110 really held well. Another 50%.
Perfect.
Yeah, another 50%. And it's 3.5 squares, 72. And again, we were looking for resistance here, 110. We got it, turned around, took out the low of the high bar, and we had nice 2 weeks of follow through. And so at least we know it's to the downside. We don't have any support really nearby. So I would trade accordingly. And what else do I have here? Well, there's that 360 again. Yeah. Well, that's the 225 that's setting up that dotted line here, half square. So we could have 225 by 90.
Right.
No pushover. So it's you think you got to figure it out. There's always next week some kind of a mystery going on. So
that's true.
But I'll tell you what, though, if you look at the 90s and all of this timing, once we get through the 360, we don't really have any big timing points till July.
Right.
And just to leave the S&P, I would say we have a more than 50% chance that we put in a high here with the cycle 360 coming in at this key level, 72 from the high, 90 from the low. That 162 is kind of a weird number that shows up and everybody misses it because it's not one of the numbers that everybody pays attention to,
True.
It's not a clean division. So,
but it is a completion number.
It is a completion number. That's right. That's the thing to remember. And anyway, that's all I got. Let's put it back to you.
Excellent. A lot to think about there.
Yeah, we got a lot going on. And if you guys like our work, please subscribe, hit the like, and also share the videos so, other people we can have more people.
Great.
And if you have any comments or thoughts about what I covered or what we cover, please feel free to leave any comments about levels or cycles or anything else. So thanks. Wow, Ben, you better explain that ABCD target.
Looky what we found.
That was last week, right? Didn't you draw that up last week?
Yeah, we drew it in last week. This is the NQs for everybody. The thing that I noticed, it was very bullish, right? We held this full square, and you can see it wasn't a perfect hold, but the next bar was up big, and then this pullback here told you it's over, right? It's over for the bears. They couldn't get back to there, and we shot up. The thing that a lot like we were talking about in Barrie's segment with the ES and other markets, there's timing and there's squares and there's geometry that's coming in here that doesn't guarantee that, hey, the rally's over, but we got to pay attention to it because it's real, right? And the first thing we look at is, okay, we had this ABCD target. Boom, there we are. We're at the ABC target. From here to here, we have a perfect 101 by 101 square.
Good enough.
That's time and price, right? Again, it doesn't mean we're going to collapse and, we're going to crash and take out the October lows next week or anything like that. While that's possible, it's a, really remote probability. The thing is, what it tells us is something is ended here. It just doesn't tell us what comes next. Now, how do we figure out what are the odds of what comes next? This is when we go to the levels. Right. So the half square here, which is at 13,700 area, That's going to be the key for next week.
Mhm.
If we go sideways, stay above it, it's bullish. You know,
Yeah.
you can't say anything but it's bullish because we'd be, you know, we're above this high that we made last August, and we're basically sitting on top of the half square and sitting on top of that high. If we pull back next week and get stuck under this half square, then this action here becomes a false break. Right?
Right.
We made a marginal high above here, basically an eighth, eighth and a 16th, so 3/16 there
Mhm.
above this high, and just pulled back immediately. So we don't have to predict, we don't have to guess. We just say, okay, 13,700 is the key for the NQs next week. As long as we're above it, we're okay. If we get trapped below it, then more significance comes into this high and the square and the ABC target that we hit. And that's how we play it, right? It's not, you know, we come here and we predict. We look at, okay, what does the weight of the evidence tell you, and what's more likely to happen based upon, you know, the probabilities of the evidence that we have. What's most likely to happen? That's what we'll do. And so as long as we're above 13.7, we're looking bullish. Below that, we have to seriously consider that something changed, and now figure out. The next thing we do is figure out, all right, what comes next? Is it a deep pullback? Is it a, you know, is it a sideways correction? Is it just choppiness and we burn off time in the cycle?
Right.
You know, or do we make it? Do we come down to the full square and hold, or do we lose that and then get back into this mess?
Right.
The market will tell us.
Mhm.
What else do you see here on the NQs you want to point out, Barry?
Well, if you combine this with what we saw in the S&P, definitely we have to take the potential cycles into account. The 101 over here and the other ones we talked about in the S&P. So a little bit of caution, little yellow flag, not to get all bullied up all at once.
Right.
But you got your level there. I think holding above half square would be the start, and it wouldn't be too far. So
We'll know fairly quickly.
yep.
So
But I
that's
would
the
say,
NQs.
as long as you're above that, the 76, is it? Yeah. No, 72. Well, your main square. Long as
Yeah,
you're
so-
above that, then I think it's generally it's in good shape. So
Yeah, that's around 13,100.
yeah.
So that's the story with the NQs.
All right.
Again, when you look at multiple markets, you know, it's sort of signaling, hey, time to pay attention. So this coming week, we got to really pay attention to the levels and see what the price action around them tells us.
Yep.
As far as the commodities go, interesting week. We're going to cover, as I said, we're going to cover cotton and coffee. One little tidbit on crude. Barrie covered that well enough, but I want to show one thing on crude, and then nat gas, which was our stellar performer of the week. As far as the others go, the grains to me look like we had a give up today. There was like a flush on, you know, they were rallying earlier in the day, and then a flush at the end of the day, creating potential false break setups in corn, soybeans, and a reversal in wheat. We just got to see sort of some bullish price action, you know, put a low in, give me a high, and then give me a higher low and a pullback. And those will end up on the show, you know, when we point them out, when those setups are there. But pay attention to the grains, because it did look like there was a flush there today. Gold, silver, and copper are all in correction mode. Sugar and cocoa are, you know, I think those things are nearer to a high. What kind of high, we don't know. Just want to see what the correction coming out of there looks like. So let's jump in on the ones we want to highlight that look attractive at this time.
All right.
There's cotton.
Mm-hmm.
Barrie and I were talking about cotton in the middle of the week. I pointed it out, you know, on a tweet to people. All of a sudden, you know, this week, you know, there's Friday, Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday. Boom, 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 boom. One inside day, but everything else they were pushing all week. And we've been in this sideways consolidation for 6 months now, you know, since November. going on 7 months. Here's the thing that really got me interested is look at this pattern here coming off of this low. You know, they kept trying to sell it, and people stepped in and bought higher 2 different times, right? They bought it here compared to there, and then higher and higher again. So we're pushing the top of the channel. To me, this thing looks like this next week we could bust out and start testing this full square. The full square is around 91 and 91.75. So that's the first sign that, okay, we broke out of the consolidation and now we're going to be banging up against this. Then we see how price handles that full square. Because you can see on the way down, it was kind of important. We stopped here, we pushed below it. This was kind of a false break formation. Then we got tested it here, shot up to the, square to square. And then coming down, when we got stuck under, it started all this mess. But this, to me, is the sign of something that's ready to go. I mean, look at the character of these bars, right? The whole week was pushing. You can see that really anywhere in here. If anything, it was the other way. It was pushing down.
Right.
So let's watch that this week. We got the levels. The half square held multiple times here on these pullbacks, and the half square is on this one is around 79.20. But this, I want to see it break the channel and then see how we react here. But it looks bullish to me and ready to go. Anything else to add on the cotton here?
No, not right now. I think we're good. I just noticed that we had that triangle. We broke out of a triangle, right? We had the upper line, and so from here, I think you're right. I think we got a decent low in place. We had the breakout, so I'd be looking for the counter trends to trade this.
Yeah, here I wanted to show you this one too. On these 2 softs, I want to show you the weeklies because they show something interesting.
Well, there's the triangle.
Yep,
better one.
There's your 6-month triangle.
Well, this is the deal, right? So now we trade the counter trends. If it goes, it's going to go from here.
See how this full square held, through all this mess. It got a little deviation here for a couple weeks. They tried to push it here, and then we broke out. So to me, cotton looks like it's waking up from the slumber we had seen. Yeah. This thing wants to go. Somebody wants to own it. All right, that's cotton. Now let's go look at another soft, coffee. So coffee's one we've been tracking into, we were tracking it into this low. We called it out. We got this nice move up. Then we got a pullback, and then we got a higher high, from here to here, higher low, here to here. And then we had this next pullback, and we said, okay, this is again going to be one that we want to watch and see if we get a higher low and a higher high. Tried multiple times. Look at all these times we were trying here. And then today, finally, we get the close over that half square. And the half square on coffee is around 189 right here. As long as we're above that, again, the higher lows are telling us people are stepping in, and we could really get that momentum kick in and see a nice move up here. The first target would be up here in the full square, which is around 212. Which if you look left, you can see how important that area was. A lot of support there that then turned into resistance when we lost it. I mean, look what happened when we lost it. Boom. So this looks like we're going to push up and get to this balance point. What happens after there, we're going to have to wait and see what price does. But coffee does look like it's accumulating. We're getting these higher lows. We're getting the higher highs. We got above this half square, and we got to close above it. So this looks fairly good to me. I want to show you the weekly on this as well, because you can see why we were where we are, right? The lows held the full square. the highs are at the half square, which is around 195. So if we can bust through that 195, it could be one of these, level to level type things that we shoot all the way up to that, this full square in that 210, 212 area. So a lot of energy could be built up that if we bust this 195, it could be a really fast trip to this 210, 212.
Yeah.
Anything else for you to add on coffee? There's the daily. I know you like to.
Yeah, I think we have to hold that trend line. If we can hold the trend line going forward, then it's all good.
Yep.
It's very important we hold that. So
All right. Let's jump over to crude. Crude, I just want to show you, Barrie did a great job covering it. What could be holding crude back and be the roof on crude? This has been for 6 weeks now.
It's pretty good geometry.
Yeah, it's good geometry. It's basically defining these, these lower highs. It's holding it. The good news is when it releases from here, you usually get some kind of, pressure release in the opposite direction. So this coming week, because the arc is declining, the top of the arc is around 71, 72 area. So we should.
Good to know, because we could just as easily slip.
Yeah, and if obviously if we can't get above that, it's going to really, it could accelerate to the downside. But I've been watching this arc, waiting for the the move out to get that fast move, which then let's say we only run up to here, but that gives us next week 90, 92. Not saying it's going to do that, but that's the energy and the move that could happen. Whereas if it keeps getting caught under here every week, it's going to accelerate. So that's just a little extra tidbit on crude. I think Barrie's got the levels there that we need to watch, and it looks good. And interestingly enough, I think your level to the upside was like 73, right? And 73 is right outside of this circle there next week. So it all fits together. Yeah. The last one I want to cover is one we've been talking about for a little while, and this week we finally got the reward for being in it, and that's nat gas. So this we started talking about it as it was coming into this low, right? And then as the bars became smaller, we said, listen, the momentum is waning on the downside. There's major divergences, in these different lows. But I said, okay, we got to find a higher high and a higher low. Well, we got a high, we got the higher low. Talked about it last week. It said that's a higher low. Now we need to see a higher high. One bar took it out.
Yep.
So this looks like we're in the early stages of having put in a bottom. Does it mean we're going to do this next week? Absolutely not. But it means right now we can know that it's a better buy, right? You're looking for spots and support where if it pulls back and you're not in it, you can get in this market.
Yeah, with less risk.
Yeah, because with the probabilities are better, right? We have more evidence now. Yeah. The next important level is this 282. Want to see how price interacts with that, because if we can get above and sit on top of that, then it opens up the pathway to $4 in nat gas. I also wanted to show the weekly on this one, because the reason we're stalling in here, we're at the half square on the weekly. So this call it 266, 267. If we settle on top of that on a weekly basis, we now have a platform to go up into, the top of this square, which is around 360, 367. So gas to me looks good. We got more evidence and confirmation this week. Now it's just, managing the trade, finding good entries, finding good exits, if you're shorter term, into resistance, like the weekly resistance that we saw at 67. But I like this market now it's a matter of figuring out, what kind of a turn is it? Are we possibly going to do more sideways, or are we going to get that acceleration like we saw this week and really, start moving out of this low? Anything else you have to add here on that, Barrie?
No, I think the counter trends are the key here to start trading.
Yeah. Yep. The evidence is there for a bullish turn. Since we earlier mentioned this, I want to have a quick discussion before we, sign off. We were talking about reference points, like what low do you use, what high do you use, how do you come up with a reference point? And I mentioned it. Part of the work that, the emphasis that Barrie and I use is we try to find these corners, or try to find these important points where there's a square out or an ABC, or a time count of a 90 or a 180 or a 45. So Barrie, talk about the reason we do that, and the reason that it's so important when you're trying to figure out where you are in a move.
Well, if you're using squares and geometry and time, it's critical that you use that, use some kind of a method. And the idea is, if you go back and test it, you have these time counts coming from just like, Gann theory, right? Basic Gann theory, Gann 101. You have these time counts coming from highs and lows, people would say. And well, actually, can I switch it back to my chart? It'd be easier for me to point it out.
Yeah, sure. Let me switch it over to you. Because I was going to say, why would you focus on this high versus this low? That's a perfect example. Because if you're focusing on that low, it certainly looks different than if you're focusing on that high.
Yeah. Let me switch.
All right, let me switch it over to you.
Can you see it?
Yeah, I see the E-mini. Yep.
Okay, great. So, well, let me move the square out of the way. Get a little bit of a clean view. Man, we still have stuff in there.
It's from that chop zone. You kept defining the chop zone.
Yeah. Let me get a clean chart here. I'm going to talk about stuff. Oh, here we go.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's the SPX. The basics of this idea would be when you do a retracement, which everybody knows how to do. Normally the best place to do it would be the last swing. So if you're doing a retracement, it'll be from this high to this low. Yeah. And you would try to figure out where the retracement would go up in here. And if it's a ratio going above that, it'll be up in here. So if we're currently, like I always say, Ben, wherever you are, you always look to the left. Yep. And what do I always say, right? Like, see how we got here.
Right.
And
where are you and how did you get there?
How'd you get there?
Yeah.
So looking at the last two swings is always, it's a natural thing to do, and you should do that every time. And the next 2 points would be the bigger swing, that you're operating within, and that would be these two, right? So these two and these two would be the most important ones. And if you look at it from the perspective of this low now, well, what does it look like? Well, we have higher lows,
higher highs,
higher highs, moving up. It looks all bullish. Everything's great. Okay, now if you take it from this high, well, we've been making lower highs, right? And lower lows. And after this high, it hasn't been taken out.
Nope. Still bearish.
So
it's just a consolidation from that high, basically.
Exactly. So if you take from that high and you're looking at the move from the high, well, this is the last high, lower high before we made a new low, but it didn't come back to the new high. So this is just a big consolidation. Is it bullish? Yeah, because it's moving off of the low. But has it started a new trend based, from your perspective of being up at the high? No, it hasn't. Right?
Absolutely.
So that's one way to do that. But the thing is, there's a certain perspective you want to get to, and because we all see things differently. If you could start doing this for every little swing, then you're going to get all confused. You're going to know which way you're going to get paralysis. So what you want to do is just keep it simple at first. Maybe you look at the last swing and the bigger swing, right? Because otherwise, now, I could easily make this into 3. If you take this swing, right? Because we're within what? We're within this swing, 1,
Mm-hmm.
2, and then we have the big one, which is 3.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think if you try to do this for everything, it's going to get confusing. And that's probably why a lot of people, it just got 1,500 lines on their chart. And
Right.
no, it's very difficult to decipher. So, but if you choose to use squares, it makes it a lot easier. So, for example, if you go from this high, we know up until this point, we spent 144 days, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was 172 by 144 when it comes into this point in price and time. And if we're above it, well, it's bullish. If you're below it, it's bearish. So you keep it very simple, and you go from the last major low. Now, let's say taking this last swing we talked about, if we take it from that low, well, lucky us, it's above
the half square. That's bullish.
That's bullish. So if you take the last 2 lows, you can kind of summarize. Well, you draw the lines. Like in this case, you will draw this line, right? 50% square.
Mm-hmm.
And you go back to the low. And you draw the line there at the 72.
And look at that. You got a box.
And you got, you got a box. And when you can start eyeballing this stuff, you don't really have to draw. You can just, you'll know.
Right.
Right. And so if you have a box, so here you would have drawn it, you would have, as soon as you had this point, these 2 points, you can draw this. And then well, it's bullish, it's not bearish. It only gets bearish once it breaks under. And then you see what happened here.
Got
right
stuck.
There.
Mm-hmm.
It got stuck, right? So it comes back for a retest and it can't get through. And, that's when you sell it with both hands. And those are like the really good trades. So that's one example of just keeping it simple and looking at it from a couple of different points. So these are lows. Now let's go to this high, because we talked about 3 swings, right? This swing, 1, 2, and then the big swing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take it from here, not much, right? And that's how you're not hitting on that number from that high.
Right.
It came down square and a half. Yeah, we held about the 72, but not a whole lot of information, other than we do have the 50% going through there,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you want to use the same theme. And when that happens, what I normally do is I'd like to put in a 90 just to see where we are, and put in a 60, see if we're running in thirds. And 60 looks
60 is pretty good.
60 looks pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So then I would make a note, like you would know from the bottom lows, you're running a 72, from the high, you're running a 60, and you would watch it. And you can see here the 60, the 30 degree, which would be the 50% of the 60, happens to be exactly in the same, actually the middle of the box.
Right, the middle of the box. Yep.
That's a key level, people, right? That's a really important level. And you can see that's why we sat on top of it for over a month.
Mm-hmm.
And if you didn't know that, it's very confusing. You're looking at the momentum, you're looking at this, the indicators are all turning down, you start to get short on every sell, and then you get all chopped up. But if you know the squares, if you know which swings to look at it, to place your squares on, then you can easily figure out where the balance is. And so you're not going to get drawn into false starts.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the key things that I'm glad you're showing this, because I really wanted everyone to understand is that in using the geometries along with the the highs and the lows and just straight technical analysis, you can understand, okay, which points are more significant, which ones do I need to pay more attention to.
Well, exactly. Yeah, that's it.
Because otherwise you could just get lost, and especially when we've seen these choppy markets like we've seen recently.
And not to make it sound overly simplistic, it takes a little practice, takes to develop the eye.
Takes time. Yeah.
Just like any other profession, you want to be a mason, you want to be this, that, plumber, you have to develop your eye and your feel and your techniques. So no matter what it is, you have to practice a little bit. But this would be, we're showing sort of the basics of what you can do to figure out how we got here. So if you go from the high, like we said, that was our first big swing, right? The high to the biggest high to the biggest low.
Mhm.
Well, one thing we know right away, hey, we're 360 bars out.
Yep.
That could be important.
That's big.
And so that's how you start counting out. I mean, that's just a simple, quick sketch of how to figure out which swings to look from. And it
Yep.
wouldn't be every one of them. It would just be, sort of simplify, sort of summarize it. You want to look at the last swing, the nearest swing, and then you want to look at the next bigger one that contains the prior one, which would be this one. The one that contains that would be this one, and the one that contains that would be the bigger one, right?
Mhm.
And so that's
Those give you points from which you can refer to the price action and say, okay, what's happening? How did we get here? Where are we
Right.
probably going?
And if you know how to read the cycles, it won't let you down. You'll know all the time, every time, what's happening. So
Excellent. Well, thanks, Barry. That's a really, really good information, and I want to make sure everyone understood that and saw that. And listen, we got a big week coming up. I know we say that often. We haven't said it in the last 3 or 4 weeks because we just been sideways, but the movement out of the ranges for a lot of markets into geometry and timing
Mhm.
has sort of put us, like you said, yellow lights go up. We got to figure out what does it mean? Is it a turn with false breaks? Is it a sideways?
Right.
The levels and price action will tell us, but this week is a major week in the markets based on these confluence of price and time that we've seen come in a lot of markets. So rest up, everybody. It's going to be an interesting week and a very
It's going to be an
informative one.
action-filled week.
And it's going to be informative. If you're
Yeah.
paying attention, we'll get a lot of really good information that gives us clues to what's more likely to happen than not going forward. So
Absolutely.
great job on the show, Barry. Everybody, we'll talk to you next week and have a great week.
Thanks, Ben. Good job.
All
See
right.
you all next week.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Bye. Thanks.